So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and those that are going to be watching the recording back. My name is Kerry Morris, and I'm Head of Partnerships and Communications here at SkillBase First Aid. As lots of you will know, SkillBase First Aid are a training company providing both first aid and mental health training courses, with our main aim of seeing physical and mental health treated equally. Alongside the mental health first aid and our own fundamental wellbeing suite of courses, we create a lot of bespoke mental health training and support for organisations, big and small, all of which starts with a simple conversation. So when thinking about World Mental Health Day this year, which is next Monday, 10th of October, we wanted to take it back to a simple, open conversation about mental health. Planning this back in August, my genuine first thought was Jon, and luckily for us, he said yes to joining me today and having a chat. I don't know whether you want to pop your video on, Jon, and your mic, and hello. Say a quick hello.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
Yeah, good. So Jon will be sort of having a chat with me, sharing his personal story and all the incredible things that he's been doing over the last 5 years specifically for raising awareness of mental health and really kind of working hard to break down stigmas and having those open conversations. We do already have some questions that have been sent in, so thank you so much to all of you that have done that. I'll make sure to include as many of these as possible in the next half an hour. We'll also be sharing any links or resources that are mentioned today, as well as a copy of the recording on email. So please just sit back with a cuppa, take a break and enjoy listening. So welcome, Jon. I won't do a big bio introduction as you're far more qualified at talking about your own life than me. So let's just start by asking, how are you today?
Yeah, again, firstly, it's just brilliant to be here and just well done in pulling, as I can see lots of people joining, and thanks everybody for taking the time to watch back today. Yeah, today I'm feeling pretty good actually. It's kind of middle of the week, and yeah, I think, things are behaving itself generally work-wise at the moment. So yeah, all good. It can all change at any given minute, but yeah, all fine. How are you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm doing really well, thanks. Although it's definitely gone very rainy and a bit stormy here. I'm in Bristol, so wherever you are, not sure what the weather's like, but it's not so great today. But hopefully that will stop and we'll have a bit of a nice day tomorrow. So I guess just sort of starting off, to tell us a bit about you and what's led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess kind of from a work perspective, I run a agency called Byte Entertainment, and we work creating websites and video content for different organizations. It's been very much my life, kind of creating content, being behind the camera, not in front of the camera. It's definitely a lot more comfortable behind it. And yeah, sadly, it was the loss of a friend 5 years ago, who I didn't realise was having real problems with their mental health. Sadly, took their life, and that was really the reason what started me talking about my own, how mental health and mental illness has impacted me and people within my family. And so it was something that, again, as my nature, is not something I'd really felt comfortable doing, but I realised, 5 years ago when that happened, that I really thought that person shouldn't have died, and I was very angry that they weren't able to access the right help and support that they needed when they were at crisis. And so, yeah, what started off as saying yes to one thing is now 5 years on, I'm still here talking about mental health, trying to reduce the stigma that exists around mental illness. And yeah, there's some really encouraging things. Just the amount of people on this call today is really, really hopeful. And yeah, knowing all of the amazing work that you're doing, Kerry, as well, with different organisations, and that organisations are now engaging more than ever around the topic of wellbeing and mental health.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you've been involved in some fantastic sort of mental health charities and lots of different organisations and events and all sorts of fun things as well. Why would you say it's kind of important for you to be doing this work, and what does it give you personally?
Yeah, so there's been a few unexpected kind of surprises, I guess, along the way. Some things that you think, if you share something that's quite vulnerable about yourself, there's obviously a lot of nervousness in doing that. And actually, my overwhelming experience of being open about my mental health has been something that's been very positively received. And yeah, is the importance of campaigns, I think, that obviously allow people with lived experience to kind of get their voice heard, potentially to a larger audience of people other than those people that are just around you. And so, yeah, it was when I wanted to do something in memory of my friend, and that's where I kind of Googled. Running had really helped me with my mental health, and I've kind of talked a lot about when I was ill with my mental health, and like literally getting out of bed felt like a marathon. But running was one of those things that really did kind of help manage my mental health, and getting out just like a couple of small runs a week. And so it felt like the logical kind of challenge to do, connected to mental health, was to find a mental health charity that I could run the London Marathon for in 2017. And I found a charity called Best Beginnings. It's a lovely charity that supports a lot of first-time families, and they've got an app and some really good video content. And they were connected to a wider campaign called Heads Together, which some people may remember was set up by the three royals of William, Harry and Kate. And it was probably the first time ever that 8 different mental health charities came together to work collectively to get the message out there that we all have mental health. And yeah, that year of 2017 was very surreal as far as some of the activities I got involved in, running a relay race with Paula Radcliffe, the Duchess of Cambridge, and some against some other royals, and yeah, so that campaign, I think, especially in the UK, for certain demographic of people in the UK, had a really positive impact. And I think we can kind of link back a lot of progress that's happened since that campaign that started 5 years ago, and a more collaborative way of working.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just tell us quickly how that came about. So you ran the marathon in 2017 for the charity, and then you were filmed, right, for BBC?
Well, so so what happened was, it was before the marathon, actually. So I'd signed up to run for the charity, and when you apply to run the London Marathon to any charity, they obviously are keen to know a bit of your reason why. So I'd given the reason why, and talked about how the reason for doing it. And in there, I talked also about my friend Jon, and it was his sister that died. And so they actually said to me, and Best Beginning said, would your friend Jon also want to run the London Marathon with you? I was very mindful that he was very early into his grief, but after a short period of time, I asked him if he wanted to run the London Marathon as well. And so that was kind of our motivation to run it. But actually, it was in January of 2017, a number of months before the marathon, that I got a phone call that said, would I be happy to share my story in front of some like-minded people? And I looked at my diary, I said yes. And a week later, I was at an event just off the Mall, so Buckingham Palace, just down the road. and I was sharing my story in front of the world's media, with the royals, with Rio Ferdinand. After sharing my story, I did a live ITV news. I did pre-records for Channel 5. And so it really was like a 0 to 100 of putting myself vulnerably out there, and sharing my story, from not, people didn't know that I'd been off work, that I'd been sectioned in a hospital. It's something that I'd kept secret for, the best part of 15 odd years, from a lot of people I knew. So it came as a great shock, I think, to people to hear my story, and the fact that it was shared on such public kind of prime time TV, was on one stage a massive relief to kind of weight off my shoulders. But definitely the following morning there was definitely a moment of reflection to realize what I'd said and that I couldn't put it back in the box. And I was pleased with what I did, but also there was definitely a moment of, of obviously talking about quite a difficult subject, and even as a family, it's something we find difficult to talk about, let alone going and sharing your story with the royals and the world's media. But it was, as I say, that all in all, obviously I'm still here today talking about mental health, and I'm really honoured to have had that opportunity to share my story on such a kind of quite a large platform.
Yeah, absolutely. What a journey to have been on.
Yeah.
And absolutely that kind of 0 to 100 as well. I haven't just eased yourself in. You went straight for it. I mean, you mentioned there that you didn't tell anyone for a long period of time, and due to that kind of stigma and potentially a bit of self-stigma in there as well. Would you say that in general, kind of today's society, that stigma has changed? Have you noticed a bit of a change, certainly in the last 5 years, to do with that?
Yeah, the stigma is definitely for certain groups of people. I think certain campaigns have done a really good job of, and certain employers have done incredibly well, especially over the pandemic, to put things in place that are supporting colleagues. So yeah, I think it is really positive that the stigma is kind of lifting, and through training people are understanding the different mental illnesses there are. And I think kind of the media sensationalism of just this one kind of blanket kind of, because obviously it's quoted quite a bit, like Bonkers Bruno, and these kind of media stories that kind of portray mental health and mental illness as something to be scared of. I think it's, these voices, lots of different people now are talking more openly about their mental health, is helping to kind of create role models and also kind of demystify some of these kind of taboo conversations that have happened in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got one of the questions actually from someone that's here today, said, if you could name one of the most important ways being open about mental health has affected your life, what would it be?
That's a brilliant question. So I think, as I kind of mentioned before, initially it felt like a massive weight off my shoulders. This was something I've been carrying around for a long time. I sadly lost my dad to suicide, and we didn't get any help or support or counselling when he died, and that was something that was very much just buried and bottled up. And then having my own mental health problems a number of years later in my first job, the fact that I was sectioned and I was in a hospital for a number of weeks, and then I was off work for the best part of a year, and then going back to work in that same kind of industry, there was, in my mind, there was always the thought that people probably knew that I had been ill and mentally ill. They probably didn't. I think we're all kind of a bit more focused on ourselves sometimes, but at the time I definitely thought that people thought I'd gone kind of mad, and as you talk about that kind of self-stigma. But the reason I wasn't going to talk about, I hopefully found the right things to kind of keep my mental health on the right side of good. And I didn't, sharing it with other people, because I really thought it would affect my career prospects. I really thought it would affect my chance of relationships, friendships. It was just, obviously those closest friends to me knew about my dad. They knew about when I'd been ill and had been incredibly supportive. But definitely in a work environment, especially when I started to get into leadership roles, there was no way I was going to tell anybody that I'd been mentally ill, because that stigma was massive, and it is still, that stigma still exists. It hasn't gone away. I think it's still very, very difficult for people to open up, but I think kind of that initial weight off my shoulders, and also what I've learned over the years is you don't have to share a lot to help somebody or to access help now. I think, I've just shared a lot of detail about my life and about my dad, but you can have the same impact with just saying, I'm having a bit of a tough time, and asking for help, or telling somebody, actually, do you know, I had problems with my mental health when I was younger. All it takes, you don't need to say a lot to make a massive difference and create that safe space.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of, there's another question here that someone had asked about, with so much happening, and they've put here financial crisis, security, lasting effects of COVID, and their question is how should workplaces be supporting their employees best? So kind of linking into that, and think you're sort of saying from the perspective of the person sharing, I guess, and actually saying, it doesn't have to be everything, every little detail of what's going on for you. It's just letting someone know that, this is kind of happening with me, and it's that trust that's there, and whether that's with a colleague in kind of peer-to-peer support, whether that's with a manager. But in terms of then the employer and how they can be supporting their employees best, what would you kind of suggest for that?
Yeah, I think setting up groups is really, that what I mentioned earlier about that kind of collaboration coming together. There's some things that you can work out within your organization yourself, whether that's kind of employee-led groups, whether it is around kind of looking at the cost of living crisis and what could be done, and what kind of ideas could be put in place within the workplace to support people through what is going to no doubt be a very challenging time, and already is a challenging time. Your training is really, really important. So yeah, first mental health first aid training, talks like this, having people in your organization, not necessarily putting all the weight on somebody internally to lead the group, but getting in external speakers as well that can help bridge that gap to kind of open up those conversations that can be quite difficult in the workplace. So yeah, I think kind of, and again, it's every company is different, every workplace is different, but again, looking at that culture that you have in place, and obviously the last 2 years, employers have been able to make kind of adjustments to make sure they can, the environment is right for every employee. And I think it takes time and effort to do that. But, from the different organizations that I've been working with, the ones that kind of put that time and effort in to really make sure that colleagues and employees that work within the organization are supported properly, will no doubt have friendlier, more productive businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we talk about quite a lot is that idea of it is ongoing. It's not something that one sort of training course or one talk can solve everything. It's never about that, but actually it's something as simple as an employee knowing that it's on the agenda, knowing that your employer isn't ignoring it, isn't and is actually really open to having those conversations and putting things in place and listening, really. So things like finding out what your employees would like to see and what support they would like to see at work, and just sort of little things like that that really show it's basically part of workplace, and our mental health is of course part of workplace because it is part of us in whatever we're doing. That's right. So another question I've got from somebody actually was, they've said, firstly, I was really happy to see you doing this webinar. I follow you on Twitter. So there we go.
Okay.
I'll put your links and socials in the email after. And that you have a really inspiring story. I wanted to know if you felt pressure being a campaigner and advocate, and how you kept a balance between your work life and your home life.
Again, another brilliant question, and thank you. How long have we got? this honestly, it's a big question, because we all have individually, we've all got things we're passionate about. There's something, everybody on that's watching this now, there's something that you're really passionate about. And sometimes you can be on the sofa and you can kind of back the cause in whatever way feels right for you. But I think, yeah, once you step it across that line to become a campaigner or an advocate for a particular cause, you are kind of putting yourself out there. And as I say, that I've been very lucky that over the 5 years that I've been doing it, it's been generally a very positive thing to do. I know that's not the case for everybody, and you mentioned Twitter, and again, I try to be very curated around who I follow on social media and the types of conversations that I have on social media. But I think there's all the emotions, and especially talking to other campaigners who are in mental health and can find it quite competitive and also quite addictive, kind of that once you've done one talk, or what's the next thing, or you see a campaign for something and you may feel left out, that why haven't I been involved in this? And so I think there's lots of layers to it, and also when you're campaigning, it can sometimes feel like quite isolating as well, and that you're kind of on your own. And you mentioned family and friends, and it's hard to really explain, to sometimes the people around you that are close to you what it is you're trying to do. And I've been very lucky that I've got a very supportive partner, and but it is very rewarding, but also it is trying to get the balance right, especially if you're not feeling great at the time, and and making sure, to my point, you don't need to share a lot to make a big difference. But I think sometimes when you are kind of the echo chamber that you can sometimes find yourself in around other campaigners, can then start to have an impact on your own mental health as well. So I think making sure that there is the right kind of support there for people that are sharing their lived experience is really important. But all in all, it's been it's created so many opportunities, and I say, just personally for me, it's been a real benefit to me and my mental health by doing what I'm doing.
And I guess one of yours would be running as well. So to kind of, someone sort of said here, what's your idea of good mental health, but also how do you keep yourself happy and healthy, mentally healthy?
Yes, there's a few things here. I think I know, like, if the worst comes to the worst and I'm really, really stressed and I'm really, really anxious, the best place for me to go to is bed. And it is just, it doesn't happen often, but knowing that actually sometimes when it all gets a bit too much, that's completely fine. And by taking yourself, very much for yourself, and that kind of self-care, and giving yourself that time just to, because those periods of anxiousness and stress, they will pass. They'll obviously be helped by talking to somebody about it. And so I've kind of got that, I guess, in my toolkit, that I know that's always there. And I know that those feelings will pass when I find myself in a tricky spot. But yeah, you mentioned running. So, even though I've done quite a lot of running over the years, I don't see myself as bizarrely as a big runner. I try to get out once, if I'm lucky, twice a week. And over the years, that's kind of, as long as I'm getting out for a bit of exercise, that really helps. And again, something I really try to do every day is, either when I go out to buy a coffee or make myself a coffee, I use that time just to kind of check in, like, how was my sleep last night? What am I worrying about? What am I grateful for? And it sounds all a bit cheesy, but a bit like running, you've got to listen to your body, and your body is giving you lots of signals, but it's very easy to put your fingers in your ear and ignore them. But if you can take just a couple of minutes out in the morning to kind of have that check-in and say, yep, you know what, I did sleep really badly last night. I have got this on my mind. Just being aware of it actually then gives you an opportunity to actually maybe, do something about it. So yeah, those are kind of couple of tips that work for me.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that one. I've actually thought about ending today, because we're already nearly at past. I could chat on and on. But I was going to end on something which ties in quite nicely with that. So I will come back to that. So in terms of, I just wanted to mention that you're going to be running New York Marathon, aren't you? So with
Jon, yeah.
With Jon again, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to go again. And so there's a whole story about running the London Marathon and how that went. But in true heads together style, we got over that finish line finally together. It was a marathon, a physical and a mental marathon. But we're going to do it again in New York in November. So that's incredibly exciting after the last few years we've had of not even being able to get on planes. But yeah, sadly, when I get off that plane, I'm going to have to do some running. And yeah, doing that for the New York Samaritans. And yeah, so it's going to be really good. And being World Mental Health Day next Monday, that's where Jon and I are going to do our kind of, I think, our last long kind of training run together. So that's something nice that we can do together on Monday.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I'll pop the link in the email for that as well. So I haven't got through all the questions, but we are going to have to finish up there. But I would like to end on something. So this is something that I do with my colleagues and friends, which is sort of setting your intentions for the day with 3 words. But as we're nearing the end of today, let's look at setting intentions for World Mental Health Day. So what 3 words would you like to be or to feel for Monday? If you can think of any. Should I tell you mine?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Mine are, I want to feel reflective, because I think it's quite a nice time to just take stock and kind of reflect a little bit. Realistic, I've put down, because I know it's going to be quite a busy day. So I want to be realistic in what I'm getting done, and inspired. So to take time out to feel that inspiration from lots of other people around us.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go with my first one that I thought of. I'm probably going to be quite sweaty on Monday if I'm going to be doing a long run. I think inspired's a really good one. And there's so much that happens on World Mental Health Day, and it's getting bigger and better every year with lots of different organisations getting involved. And yeah, the other, I'm going to be feeling a bit yellow, I think, as well, because there's a charity called Young Minds, and they are an amazing charity for younger people, and they ask everybody to wear yellow on World Mental Health Day, and so I think my kids will be wearing yellow too on the way to school. So I think those are my 3.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, huge thank you for your time today. Really appreciate you joining us and just having a really nice open chat. And thank you so much for those listening in. And I hope you've sort of taken away lots from today and think about what your 3 words are going to be for the next few days and for World Mental Health Day. So have a great rest of the week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thanks again.